We just finished. Jim just joined us. Hello, Jim.
Hi there. How are you?
Hello. For those of you that don't know, Jim Mathews is the president of the Rail Passengers Association. Used to be NARP, renamed a couple of years ago, and he has graciously agreed to spend a few minutes with us to give us updates, which this time has been very positive news over the last couple of weeks, which coming out of COVID is kind of very good news since the last year. A lot of news regarding passenger rail and mass transit and public transit in general has certainly not been good as COVID has cut back on travel so much. But welcome to Jim Mathews to give us an update from the national perspective.
I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if we can see this.
I can see it.
Yep, all
Super.
good, Jim.
All right, thank you, and thanks everybody. I can't see everybody out in the audience like I normally would. I missed my trip out to that lovely little facility next to the theater. That's a nice place. So maybe next year. But listen, it has been a really terrific week for passenger rail, hasn't it? And I'm going to take us through some slides that I've got here, which we're prepared mostly just for this week's action, but they really do kind of show you where we are for the rest of the year. And whether, yes, we got a terrific victory this past, actually it was last weekend, and then getting it signed this week. Getting the rescue bill passed was really important because it means we are going to be able to restore daily service. But that's one step, and we have a lot more to do, and we have a very small window in which to do it. So the reality is that we have a very small window in which to act. We have very tight margins in which to operate, and we have extraordinarily urgent needs. We wanted to restore the daily service. That's done. Return of furloughed employees. That's done. But we still need to revive, shore up Amtrak's infrastructure investments. It's tunnels, it's right of way, it's rolling stock, it's anything you can imagine. We're pushing for a predictable, dedicated funding mechanism of some kind with mode parity, to be able to kind of put rail on an equal footing with other modes. That is an enormous goal, and we have the opportunity to do that in this legislative session, but it's very, very, very short. And we need to reintroduce and strengthen the Moving America Forward Act, H.R. 2. That is, you've heard us use the phrase FAST Act reauthorization. That's the Surface Transportation Bill. H.R. 2 was that bill. So we weren't able to get that done by the end of the last session before the election. So we're going to have to start over and reintroduce it. The good news is we're in a good place for that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So we have a very confused environment in the 117th Congress, and there's a lot of loose ends left to tie up. Against all of that is the political reality that the Biden administration and lawmakers must quickly make visible difference in the ordinary lives of ordinary people. This is not a time for studies, for scratching your head or chewing on the end of a pencil. We have got to see things meaningfully change for regular folks. It needs to be visible and obvious. And so that means certain kinds of actions are going to be more desirable than others just because they're going to go faster. So I do believe that we have a confluence of personalities and politics, plus the exigencies of the pandemic. They do give us a historic opportunity if we can act quickly and decisively. I'm going to skip over these slides because this was when we were pushing for the rescue funds. As it turns out, the 1.541 billion got plussed up in the Senate to 1.7 billion. So that's terrific. That's really great. And that got done. And so we believed then, and we were correct, that the COVID relief bill was the best vehicle for delivering this kind of top up for fiscal 21 money, which would allow us to restore daily service and to bring back the employees that were furloughed due to COVID. Every advocate can claim a piece of this. This was we helped to write language to not just put the money in, but to tie that money to restoration of daily service, and recalling the workforce. We pushed very, very hard for that with the relevant congressional committees. But we couldn't have done any of that pushing without rank and file advocates, both in the Rail Passengers Association, in ESPA, in All Aboard Ohio, All Aboard Washington, all the organizations that are out there. Your collective voice made an enormous difference. So don't ever forget that you can make a difference with your phone calls, with your emails, with your texts. They do count. So the current situation, now that we're getting ready to restore daily service, we have an administration team that is pro-rail and anti-status quo. We have the DOT Secretary, Secretary Buttigieg, who you see here with our Summer by Rail intern, Elena Studio. This is when he was still mayor of South Bend, and Elena presented to the mayors her Summer by Rail project. And so that was interesting and fun. You have Polly Trottenberg, who is the DOT Deputy Secretary. Amit Bose, who is right now the acting FRA administrator. He's the deputy administrator of the FRA. Chris Coase came out of Smart Growth America, and he terrific guy, and we work very closely with him in his sort of transit-oriented development hat before he came to the administration. So you have a whole team of people that really are trying to change the way we think about transportation in this country. So it's not just one person. It is a philosophy that is being reflected in the appointments. And that's very, very good for a lot of the things that we were trying to accomplish. You can pick any senator you'd like in that sort of centrist coalition. Manchin, Tester, who's on the picture here. But we have a pro-rail consensus in the House and the Senate, particularly in the Senate. The House, not so much. We have our allies there. We have some folks that are going to support rail, and so that's been a good place. But for us, really, the bulwark has been the Senate. And now, because of the way that the Senate is split 50-50, that's going to mean that people like Senator Manchin from West Virginia or Senator Tester from Montana are going to hold a lot of influence, more than perhaps in years past. Well, what does that mean for us? Well, these are states that just happen to be well served by long distance connections. So these are the folks that we think that the long distance network is going to elevate in the national conversation, and indeed it already has. We think that there's going to be a lot more leverage there for improvements than we've had in the past. I'm going to go over this just super quickly. COVID is still a problem. Ridership remains a problem. Demand is down, both for public transit and for Amtrak. It is coming back, but it is not there yet. This is, I should have redone this slide for today, but honestly, I just did not have the time to get to redoing this slide with new numbers. But this shows you the general path of Amtrak ridership through what I'll call the COVID period, right? So beginning last March through in this case, through December. The red line shows you the long distance, the national network ridership. The yellow line is the Northeast Corridor, and the blue is the state-supported services. You can see they all fell off a cliff in March and April of last year as the COVID restrictions really came down. And then they began to gradually sort of bump up a little bit. Amtrak had imposed a 50% capacity cap on its bookings to keep people socially distanced on the train. So there was a limit to how much that was going to come back anyway. But that said, you can see that when given the opportunity, the long distance services kind of held their own pretty well. State supported it as well. Again, when you take into account the capacity restrictions. So priorities and key dates. So daily service done. But we're looking for that transformational change, and we think we can get it done. We have some vehicles, some legislative vehicles in which to get that done. And so this is an important set of vehicles for us to think about as advocates. So our association, our COVID-19 relief goals, we want the policy items and principles to push to, and we've gotten a lot of those done in this last bill, in the COVID-19 relief bill. We got the emergency funding that mandates daily service. We returned the furloughed employees. We actually got 30 billion for mass transit. So this is all good. So the next thing is advancing what we call our blueprint ideas. Now, this was the I'm sorry. There's some noise. That's Gary. Could I ask you to possibly mute? I think it might be you. Thank you, sir. Um, so yeah, our blueprint ideas. We put these together before the FAST Act reauthorization process began. We did it about 2 years ago, and we've continually updated that. But sort of the principles underneath it are that we want a sustainable national system. We want to go after a state of good repair all around the country. We want to support high-speed rail. We want to see investment parity with other modes. We want to see a renewed emphasis on attacking on-time performance. Now that the metrics and standards framework went through last year, the FRA went through the rulemaking, and now we have metrics and standards in the regulation, and now we have a Surface Transportation Board that has a framework to operate on them. We want to see that return. We're going to push for multi-year appropriations. We think that that helps us with that idea of predictable and dedicated funding. We want to promote the FRA's regional corridor development studies. Our association took part as a study partner in those studies, and they came close to being released, and then they kind of stalled. And we would like to see the Southeast and Midwest studies, which were completed, released publicly, and we would like to see us move with some speed towards doing the rest of the country, because we think that's an important framework to match up federal policy priorities with state rail plans. It's a good way to marry those two. And we need to begin investing now in refreshing the rail fleet, whether we're talking about single level equipment, bi-level equipment, locomotives. This is the time. And we have included that in our reauthorization blueprint. Right now, that lives in HR2, which passed the House last year, and is going to be reintroduced this spring in the House with these kinds of actions in them, as well as some others that were already in HR2, which we very much support. So there were reforms to the Amtrak board, for example, in HR2. There was an emphasis on food and beverage in HR2, which we support. There was probably the most important and yet overlooked part of HR2 was the redefinition of Amtrak's mission to take away that even the hint that profit should drive Amtrak's mission. Profit has not been legally required for Amtrak since 1978, but there's been a lot of confusion around how true that really is, regardless of what the statute says and what the accompanying report language said. So HR2 attempted to really put a stake in its heart and say Amtrak's mission is to serve the country and not explicitly to make a profit. All of those reforms that were in HR2 that passed last year are going to stay in HR2 this year, or in whatever succeeds it. And so we want to build on that foundation and add some more things. And so these are the kinds of things that we think we can get done this year. We want to add a look at intercity passenger rail commissions, right? The Southern Rail Commission is a good model, and we think that we could clone that model around the country and really create a funding vehicle that can kind of work through some of the parochial issues in different states. And it also helps with service to places that may not have a robust rail planning facility within their state governments, but the service would still be desired by the communities that are in those states. I think a rail commission is a good way to kind of get at that. the Amtrak board representation, HR2 last year reserved 2 slots for state-supported stakeholders. There was a slot for governor. There was a slot for labor, and there were 2 slots for passenger organizations. And so we are going to continue to push for that because we think it's important that the Amtrak board more accurately represents all of the stakeholders in the railroad. I'm going to lay this out. I know a lot of people don't like getting hung up on these dates, but it is important to realize that there is a budget season and it does run. And those dates tend to drive a lot of the decision making about what can and cannot get into the bills. We're already here at mid-March. The pandemic rescue measures from last year expire, were set to expire in the middle of March. And so that did sort of concentrate minds on getting this rescue bill done. You saw the results of that. We got it done last weekend and it got signed this week. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So the next set of deadlines that are coming up, the debt limit comes back into force on August 1st. And then September 30th, the end of fiscal 21, authorizations expire. So the FAST Act that got kicked down the road for 1 year because of the election last year is going to expire on September the 30th. So the TSA authorizations, a few other things. So again, we have another moment that's going to concentrate minds on trying to get some kind of reauthorization done. There's some tax extenders, some other relief measures that expire December 31st. Those will also drive some of the decision making that we see in the Congress. So I raced through that because I wanted to create a opportunity for questions, but I'm ready to take any questions, Bruce, if you have them.
Okay,
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Yeah, hang on, I've got some questions here.
Okay.
Let's see. Is there any oxygen in Congress for a program to electrify more of the national rail network?
There is. I'm not going to sit here and say that we have a consensus in the Congress, but there's a lot of people that are talking about electrifying more of the network than have ever talked about it before. I think it's really encouraging. And that aligns with the administration's priorities, right? The Biden administration has actually been talking about trying to increase the degree of electrification around the country as a climate move. So I think you're going to see some more of that. We do. One of the bills that is likely to come up here as a vehicle for some of the things we want is some kind of infrastructure package used as a stimulus. That feels like a really good place to kind of tuck in some policy and some funding around extending electrification, because the desire is to make that infrastructure package a green bill. Remains to be seen whether there's enough juice in Congress to really get that done. There are folks who now want to hold a lot of provisions hostage, having finished the rescue bill for $1.9 trillion. All of a sudden, deficits matter again. They didn't matter 2 years ago, but somehow they matter now. And so there's going to be some hostage taking on certain provisions, I'm sure. But we are hearing a lot more conversation about a whole range of green initiatives, including electrification. And there's a whole range of competing visions for an infrastructure bill that could potentially fund that. We have, Congressman Moulton's bill for high speed, which would be enormous amounts of money. So, over $100 billion over its life. You could do a lot of electrification with that. At the same time, we have competing proposals for investment in locomotives and rolling stock and that kind of thing. And certainly the House, within the reauthorization context, has been talking about something called the prime grants. And prime grants would give states the opportunity to get some formula money as well. And that's also a substantial amount of money, about $30 billion. So lots of vehicles, lots of different places you could pluck that out. But it's no longer a fringe idea. It's not just one or two congressmen that are talking about it. You can hear that conversation in a lot of places now, more in the House than in the Senate, if I'm going to be honest. But that's okay. I think that the fact that we're having the conversation and the fact that the Biden administration wants to advance that conversation will give it a little juice as we go into an infrastructure package.
Another question, Jim, how does RPA see Brightline and Texas Central type projects fitting into the overall Amtrak or national network?
Well, I think, I don't think our position's changed. They all have a role in sort of the ecosystem of transportation. Those companies are doing some great things. They are trying to advance rail in their communities and in their markets. They think they found a way to do it, and we support that. Our big thing is that whatever projects come along, particularly ones that are driven by private capital, they have to connect to the network. They can't be kind of dangling up there by themselves. Texas Central, for example, is very explicit about the degree to which they will interconnect with the Amtrak system, to the point where they've already developed an interlining agreement where you can buy a through ticket. That's the kind of connectivity we think is really important. You need to be able to use that high-speed leg as one leg of a larger journey, and to the extent that you do that and the systems are all connected, we think that's ideal. That's wonderful, because again, I mean, what does it say here above my head? We're working for a connected America. Well, connected, not disconnected. We want all of these networks to be able to function alongside each other and in an interconnected way so that passengers can get wherever they need to go. And we don't want to see it, where you have these systems sort of dangling out by themselves.
Yeah, here's a good question that just came in for Jim. What kind of changes within PREA and state-supported services RPA advocating for within the reauthorization?
We are, at a minimum, we think the increased transparency around what states are being charged and the basis of what's being charged to the states. We think that's important. We think that there needs to be a clearer understanding of not only what's being charged, but an understanding that Amtrak, it can't be one size fits all. There's an enormous difference between California and Indiana, right? And Amtrak should have a menu of options to offer, so that for those states that really require a service to just kind of come in and do it, Amtrak can do that. But at the same time, you can do, if you are a state with a sophisticated network and a mature and robust state rail plan, you should be able to a la carte your way through what Amtrak can do. And when you do that, if you're picking a la carte off the menu, it's not unreasonable to know what the menu price is before you order your food, right? So that's kind of where we're at with that. I also think it's very important for us to address the mileage of what state-supported route is, right? I mean, right now, PREA says we're at 750 miles. There's not a lot of states where that makes sense. If you really look at it, almost any route that you're talking about at 750, you're going to cross states, and that means you're trying to get all these states to align on getting things paid for and getting their share. And it's just, it's proven to be just a difficult thing to do. We would like to see that mileage cap, if you will, or that threshold lowered to 500 miles. And so routes over 500 would find their way into the national network, so that you don't force states, particularly after states have been, in many cases, devastated by COVID-19. So you don't force them to have to make these kinds of choices to get the service that they need. And so we think 500 miles is a better place to start than 750. And we'll push for that as well.
I think I see at least one more, Bruce, that might be interesting for everybody. Describe the timetable and context of reintroduction of traditional dining service and other food service enhancements across the system. I guess before you answer that,
I was skipping that one, Gary,
I
purposely.
know. I figured we'd leave that one in as maybe the final question, because that does bring a lot of stuff. And let me try to just summarize what I think I heard over the last day or two. Is that the food service is coming back on the dining, in the dining cars for the ones that had it before COVID, which would be the west of Chicago trains. But with the fresh food made on the train in the diner, but the delivery is still questionable because of COVID, as far as either having to eat it in your room or possibly using the every other table type item. So my understanding is that it's coming back with the return of daily service to the Western trains only, because they're the ones that had it right before COVID started. But yet you still will be somewhat limited by COVID. So I'll put that over to Jim to see if he can add to my answer there.
I do want to, I really do want to address that. And I'm sure my friend Derek is going to jump in here. I don't know if it'll be now or later.
I'm listening.
But it was good for you. But listen, we get so wrapped around the axle on the dining stuff, guys. And it just, I honestly don't understand why we overcomplicate this. This is not confusing. We're making it confusing, okay? The Western trains went to the flexible contemporary model so that you could keep people out of harm's way. It was a way of delivering food to the passenger with only one person, okay? Nobody said that that was going to be the way it was going to be going forward. Everybody said that was going to be temporary. We said it, Amtrak said it, and we said it over and over and over again. And here we are, we're restoring daily service, and lo and behold, yes, it's temporary. They are bringing it back, just like they said they were going to do.
Yep. But as you know, a lot of people that didn't believe that. So that's good that they're doing it.
There were a lot of people who didn't believe it, but the fact is that we said all along that that's how it was going to be, and that's how it's turning out to be. Now, we still have COVID in this country. We still have virus cases in this country. We don't have people who are vaccinated. We have people who are refusing to be vaccinated. We have potential for new spikes as the new variants come along. There's a lot of uncertainty. The intent, when I talk to my friends within the railroad, and Derek's going to correct me, I'm sure. But when I talk to those folks, the intent is, if you're going to have close to a normal sleeper demand in those trains, once you've restored daily service, and they think that that's going to be the case, you want to at least try to offer some kind of a traditional dining experience. Now, what is that experience going to look like in June, when we're, at sort of lower levels of vaccination, versus, I don't know, September, when we have a lot more people vaccinated? It's probably going to be a lot different, right? Because we're going to have more people vaccinated. The country is going to feel a little safer. They have to develop some ways to address the safety issues while also delivering that food. So it's not a binary. And I wish I could get advocates to stop thinking about these things in such black and white terms, that it's on or it's off. That's not how anything in life works, but particularly something like this. Serving food to people in an enclosed space in the middle of a pandemic, they're doing their best. And they're going to slowly roll this thing out, and they're going to try to work on safety protocols, and they're going to try to get it so that they can deliver food to a dining car. But it's going to be staged, because they're not necessarily going to have the safety stuff in place to make that work from day one. It doesn't mean they're not working on it. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to start making it like it used to be, where you go sit in the dining car and meet 3 other people at your table and have a wonderful conversation. That's the part I love. And it's the part a lot of us love. And that's coming back. But is it going to be back on May 24th or July 6th? Well, it's going to kind of depend, right? I mean, we got to see where we are in the pandemic and where we are in vaccinations and where we are on safety and where we are on people's compliance with masking and all the rest. So I think it'd be very unfair to judge how this is going to go by, we're going to start seeing daily service return on May 24th. So if someone sits there on May 31st and says, oh, see, this is the way it's going to turn out, well, you'd be wrong. Let's let the thing unfold and let them do it in a safe way. The intent is to try to bring back a traditional dining experience on those trains that lost it on the 6 Western trains. Now, Eastern trains, different story. That was not traditional dining before COVID. It's not going to be traditional dining after COVID. That is something that we are working on as well. We've been working very closely with Representative Cohen's office. And there are food and beverage measures within HR2, which will come around in the second version of the bill. And there's a working group that is in HR2 that is required to happen and work on the food and beverage problem. So that is a longer term answer, but we'll be involved in that. And it's hardly a done deal. So in some ways, stay tuned.
Yeah, Jim, just as a follow-up to what you just said, I can also reemphasize that, as some of you know, I operate a food service establishment, and I get the same questions every day. People come in and it's like, oh, when are the tables and chairs going to be back? I want to sit down and eat. I don't want to take my food out to my car to eat. Everyone's like, well, what day can I sit in the restaurant and eat? Cuomo allowed 50% occupancy. Why can't I sit down and eat now? I mean, so it's not just the fact of the dining cars and Amtrak. I could tell you it's in the whole restaurant industry, where as soon as something loosens up, people think everything's going to go back to normal. And I can tell you, as somebody that operates in the restaurant field, it's simply going to be a gradual process. So I get the same thing in mind. So it's not just Amtrak / dining car issue. It's a matter of just people's perception that they just want COVID to be over and be back to normal. And it's just not a switch that flicks like that. So, but anyway, thanks for you stopping. Thanks for Jim stopping by. I enjoyed having your half an hour here. I know we had kind of short notice and you've had a very busy week with everything else going on with Congress and Biden and the legislation and COVID-19 bill and everything else. But I'm glad you could take a half an hour out of your busy Saturday. So.
No, hey, Gary, can I say something? It's Derek. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Derek.
No, I just want to say thank you, Jim, for all your advocacy on behalf of your passengers. It's a great partnership. A very well said answer. I have nothing else to say.
Okay.
Oh, I passed the Derek test.
I guess you get an award now, huh?
No, Derek, I appreciate that. It's we've all been working arm in arm on this stuff, and it has been a good partnership, and I'm very grateful for it. So. Listen, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we can't all be in person, and I look forward to maybe next year we can actually shake hands and see each other.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.